This is Hikaru Ibayashi from University of Southern California, and I'm going to present our work, Exponential Escape Efficiency of SGD from Sharp minima in non-stationary regime. This is a joint work with Masaki Maizumi from University of Tokyo. Since our work is on the theory of stochastic gradient descent, or SGD, let me start with the simplest possible definition. We consider the SGD with those notation where theta is a model parameters and eta is a learning rate and LSLB is a mini batch loss. As is well known, SGD is the most standard optimization method in the modern machine learning community because of its efficiency. And the surprising part of SGD is that it is not just efficient, but also it converges to the generalizing solutions. This generalization property has not been explained theoretically, remaining as an important open question. Recent studies have been showing that the generalization is highly related to the sharpness of minima. As is visualized, it is known that some minima have sharp, spiky shape, and the other have flat, smooth shape. One study has shown that the sharp minima tend to be not generalizing, and this study has been endorsed by the fallout work by a large-scale experiment, and that showed that sharpness has the strongest correlation with generalization. With these facts in mind, now the question is why SGD can find flat minima. We investigated how sharpness changes during the training process. As is shown, sharpness widely fluctuates in the early phase of the training, and eventually it settles down to a relatively smaller value or flat values. This implies that in the early phase of training, SGD keeps jumping out of sharp minima until it reaches some flat minima. More intuitively, SGD find flat minima in this way. SGD keep jumping out of sharp minima as illustrated on the right half of the figure until it reaches and find a wide flat minima as the left half of the figure. In our paper, we formalize this intuition more theoretically. There are several existing studies related to SGD's escape efficiency. Zhu et al. Find that SGD's escape is caused by its unique noise shape called anisotropic noise. And just Rabusky et al. Proposed a formal analysis of SGD's escape, assuming that SGD has reached a stationary distribution after a long iteration. Xie et al. Elaborated this analysis and showed that under this stationary assumption, SGD's escape efficiency from sharp minima is exponentially high. However, the assumption of stationary distribution is known to be a strong assumption. First of all, it's known that SGD has stationary distribution on very limited objective functions. And furthermore, even if SGD has a stationary distribution, it requires a large number of iterations to reach the stationary state. In order to fully formalize the SGD's escaping behavior, it is essential to go beyond this stationary regime. In our work, we approach this problem in a brand new manner. We utilized a framework called large deviation theory. With this framework, we don't need the assumption of stationary distribution. Nevertheless, it has the equally strong implication that means SGD has exponential escape efficiency from sharp minima. Here's our main result. Consider a local minimum theta star. Our main theorem says that time to escape is mainly determined by delta L, the depth of the minimum, and lambda max, the maximum eigenvalue of Hessian matrix at theta star, or you can just see it just as sharpness. This sharpness term appears here only when SGD is used. So as you can see, when the minimum is or if the minimum is sharp, then the lambda max becomes large, and therefore the time to escape becomes smaller. Or intuitively, SGD quickly escape from the sharper minima. Therefore, the answer for the initial question, why does SGD escape from sharp minimum, is that sharp minimum enlarges SGD's noise, which makes SGD escape faster, or more broadly, that's why SGD can find generalizing flat minima. Let's move on to the technical detail. In the very first place, what is large deviation theory? It is a fundamental theory of diffusion process, and where diffusion process means continuous stochastic process with Gaussian perturbation. Large deviation theory formally analyzed the behavior of diffusion process around a minimum, and it can formalize the measure called exit time from a domain, which is the time for a process to get out of a given domain, D. In our problem, SGD is reduced to the diffusion process, and the exit time quantifies escape efficiency. The main argument of large deviation theory is that the expected time is proportional to the exponent of the smallest quasi-potential v theta on the boundary of the domain D. In the case of SGD, this quasi-potential is defined as follows. The intuition of v theta is the smallest energy to climb up from a minimum theta star to theta. Let me visually illustrate this intuition. Suppose we have the local minima theta star. There are many trajectories to climb up from theta star to theta. For example, one trajectory phi A might be like this, or another trajectory phi B might take a strange path like this. However, as you can imagine, the smallest possible energy, smallest energy trajectory would be probably something like this straight line. So by definition, the quasi-potential v theta is defined as the energy along this smallest possible energy path phi star. In a similar manner, you can define the quasi-potential for all the points on the boundary, and exit time is determined by the smallest one among those. In this example, probably around this point. So to summarize the main argument of large deviation theory in a few words, the exit time is determined by a point that is the easiest to exit from. The last step to compute the quasi-potential of SGD. So since it is hard to directly compute it, we use a simpler system as a proxy to get the approximated value. Quasi-potential of the proxy system is already known, and we proved that v theta and v hat theta are close enough with the scaling factor lambda max. Then we can estimate v theta is approximately as 2 delta L times lambda max to the power of -1/2. And this approximation immediately leads to the main result. In conclusion, we introduced large deviation theory to analyze the escape efficiency of SGD, and we found that SGD has the exponential escape efficiency without the assumption of stationary distribution. Our result is a strong endorsement of escaping hypothesis. That means SGD quickly escapes from sharp minima, and thus SGD converges to generalizing solution.